Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this little freebie, this little introduction to constellations. Everyone do the Muppet wave. Hi. It's good to see you all. I'm Leslie Nips. I'm your guide and teacher for today. And hopefully all have a little bit of fun, okay? I am a facilitator of 15 years, and I do an annual constellation training. And so this is an opportunity to put your toes in a sense, into the work. As I've watched the registrations over the last few weeks, there is a broad range of experience that is here. There are some people in this workshop who could do this, who could do an introduction to constellations, right? Or at least you've been exposed enough that some of this stuff may be like, I already know all that. And then for some of you, this may be so new, so off your map, that it may feel a little fire hosey and some things maybe go by. Don't worry about it too much, okay? I am trying to give an honest introduction to family constellations and the work, and then have some exercises, hopefully, that you'll get something out of. Little bit of brief Zoom. We do a little orientation here in the beginning. Everybody's muted. Typical Zoom etiquette, we ask people to stay muted unless they are speaking. We're not going to use the chat much. You can use it to ask a question, but my own guess is that we're going to be a small enough group. It can be helpful to have the sorry, something just went weird on my screen. So give me 1 second. I need to do this. That's what I need to do. Okay. So that if you just raise your hand, but you may just want to use the digital hand, which is part of the reactions in the bottom. You'll see there. If you have a question or if you want to respond to an invitation for volunteering or something like that. I've got myself spotlit right now. That's to serve the recording, make things easy. And I think that's probably the way we'll have it most of the time. And just a reminder, of course, this is being recorded. You all know that. So if you ask a question or you volunteer for something, this is your implied consent to being recorded and having this shared with people who are not here right now. So let's just take a little moment. If we did introductions from everyone, we'd be done. So we're not going to do that, but it would be nice in the chat if you put in your name and where you're zooming in from. It just gives us a sense of where we are in the world. I know this is a pretty international group. I am in the United States, the southwest of the United States, near the city of Albuquerque. I'm not going to read everyone's location, but read each other's locations. Take a look at the chat and get a feel for where people are from. And we've already got the United States and Israel and Romania. So we're covering a reasonable part of the globe. The free event this afternoon is going to have more of the sort of Australians and New Zealanders and Hong Kongers joining us, because right now it's the middle of the night for them. But just check out these places that people are from. More from Israel, more from the United States, Canada, a bunch of Canadians. That's great. All over the world. So add those in. A little outline. I'm going to start out with some talk. I'm going to do a little lecturing. I am not going to show slides. Yeah. From time to time, I will put some key concepts in the chat. But otherwise, if there's something you want to remember, you'll have to, you're going to get the recording, but you can take notes if you like for yourself. We're also going to do small group practice, okay? And there aren't going to be any breaks. It's only 2 hours. So if you need a break, take care of yourself, okay? Little bit of a group agreement before we get going. I don't expect us to go in the deep end with massive emotional vulnerability today. that's not the plan. But stuff comes up or feelings come up. Yeah. So having a group agreement with, a group that we don't know each other is a very useful thing to do. I recommend this for your constellation gatherings. Yeah. Some kind of a group agreement can be very simple. A few things that I like to say is, number one, we're on tech. Tech can be glitchy. Let's have patience if tech gets glitchy. And if you're having a bad tech day, bad internet, or whatever it is, we can't stop and troubleshoot for you. Okay. Some of you may be experienced with other constellation facilitators, but not me. The nice thing about constellation work, since Bert Hellinger founded it many years ago, is that there's a basic foundation. You will recognize what I share today. And the other nice thing is it has evolved massively in lots of different ways, applications and styles and frameworks. And so what I do today may look a little different than what you normally see when you go to constellations. I hope you find that interesting and you're curious about that. If by any chance it's not your cup of tea, that's just fine. No problem. I just invite you to let me captain the ship for the sake of everyone today. Yeah. It's my plan that in addition to good learning, I mean, that's the main thing we're here for, is information, that you may get a thing, a little movement, an insight, a little bit of healing. It may explode your world. That's not very likely. Or more likely, it could be partial, right? We do these things and we get a little thing. We open a door and we go, oh, crap, that door's open now. Yeah. So just be, understand the partiality of what might show up and be okay with that. Confidentiality, you may know some people here, but even if you don't, you will be interested in sharing what you experience with other people. That's just fine. Just leave out all the personal details if you hear any. Yeah. Again, this is not going to be hugely personal today. But if you hear any, leave those out of your sharing. Everyone work okay with all that? Raise your hand. Everyone good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. So we did the boilerplate. Let's come together. Let's do a little meditation. Yeah. Let's just settle, whatever kind of a day you're having. Constellations offers us the opportunity to do, meditations come in all kinds of forms. They're very useful. And Constellations brings a particular hit on that, right? So take a moment, just come to yourself, find your center in any way that you like to do that. I like to close my eyes, settle in my seat a bit. Notice my breath and my heart beating. Maybe have a sigh. Just come home to yourself for a second. And as you're doing that, I will share what many of you know, which is that Family Constellations understands that all of our forebears, the beloved dead, our ancestors, are always in some sense present to us, whether we are conscious of it or not. And so, because that is true, I invite you to bring them to consciousness. Notice your ancestors. Some of you may have a energetic feeling physically around you. Others may have an image in your mind's eye. Others may have a different way of noticing this. Just let yourself notice. Your ancestors are present. These are the ones we always belonged to and from whom we got our lives. And although they are on the other side of the veil, they understand what it's like to be alive, to be human, to be born and to die, to love and to lose love, to feel joy and pain. They look at us with understanding. Someday you'll be with them. Not now, not for a little while. And then I invite you, and just try these out. Wherever you are in your healing journey, these words that I'm going to suggest may feel really welcome and easy, and for others they may be tricky. Feel free to change them if you want to. But I invite you to try these words in the presence of your ancestors. You can say them out loud or in your mind's eye. Dear ancestors, I honor the dignity of your fate. I have a place in my heart for all of that, and I leave it with you. Thank you for my life. Please bless me as I walk my path. And if that felt okay, you might hear them say back to you, of course. Just notice what that's like. That may feel really sweet and welcome, or it may feel tricky. Whatever it's like is fine. For some of you who are very new to this frame, it can sometimes be a little tricky. Yeah, that's okay. And then I invite you to come on back. And let's hear 2 or 3 shares, very brief, but what did you notice? What was that like? It's very helpful to me because there are enough of you under reactions at the bottom to look for that little raise hand function, because that brings you to my attention. It would be nice to have 2 or 3 shares. Ashley, thank you.
Hi, everyone. What I noticed is an ancestor, like France itself as a country, showed up. So my dad's from there, and yeah, so the experience or the essence of France. So not a particular person, but a place.
That's nice. Yes, ancestral lands are very important to our ancestors and to us. Yeah, if they're recent enough, it's where a lot of our ancestors are buried.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if there's immigration, one of the costs of immigration, whether voluntary or forced, is being separated from the places where the ancestors are buried. So it's nice to bring that all to presence. Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. There was somebody else who had a hand up, and then the hand went away. Ilya. Ilya. Thank you. Thank you for the pronunciation guide.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, yeah, it's Ilea. Thank you for hosting this. Yeah, I felt a deep connection and communication with my ancestors, as I often do. But I think what was most prominent for me in this moment was hearing the ancestry of the Zulu nation, who actually introduced this to the rest of the world, how this came from South Africa. And it was the Zulu nation and the ancestry there that spoke to me very powerfully, that says their name must be spoken. Because when we look on Google, it says that this was introduced by some German man. And as most African spiritual traditions have been stolen and completely destroyed and renamed under some European person or white skinned person. And they wanted me to very clearly say that this was something that originated from African spirituality, and is often African spirituality is often demonized in comparison to religion, and Christianity in specific, and till this day is still not honored and respected in the way that it's supposed to be, by honoring that ancestry first that delivered this to the rest of us, to teach us the benefits and the blessings and the medicine that comes with connecting to our ancestry. And so,
Apologies. Thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing that in.
yeah, and so that was very beautiful for me to witness that connection going all the way back, and connecting myself to my own very clear conversation and lineage with my ancestry. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that was a really beautiful download for me right now.
Thank you. And what you're bringing to awareness here is another aspect of this, which is that we have different ancestries, right? There's the biological ancestries, which is often the focus of our attention because that's where we get our life. But we have professional ancestries, we have spiritual ancestries. They're all, they're teaching ancestries, and those are all available to be connected with and to honor. And for those of you who want to know more about what she was just talking about, invite you to check out the work of African Constellations. They've done a lot of research on this actual history, and what was Bert Hellinger's actual relationship to the Zulu community. And you can find out there are a lot of subtleties and nuances about this, including Bert Hellinger's own respect for the Zulu community, and them having told him, we want to keep some of this private. So, which is also an interesting part of the story. So I invite you to look that up. One more share. What was the brief share about connecting with your ancestors that way? Carmen, I think you're lucky I see your hand because you're on the upper strip. I do invite people to use the raised hand so that I can sometimes see you if I otherwise not able to. Yeah, Carmen.
Yeah, I have a delay in my internet, so that's why I did my hand first. So, but thank you for that reminder. And the ancestors for me that showed up was unexpected. It was a very young matriarchal lineage, which is unusual for me. It's usually the elders of the lineage that will be present, and this time it was the younger ones that are in that dimension, that didn't just stand behind me. They stood around and caressed my hair and touched my body, and was kind of like, we're here, we're here. It was a very butterfly and rainbow experience. So that's what showed up for me. And thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a nice thing when we do these things, even for those of us who've done them a lot. The field will often reveal something new, something we haven't connected with before, or the aspect of the larger field that we especially need today. Yep. And so I'm glad you had that, Carmen. That's really great. Okay, so thank you for doing that little meditation. I'm going to start out with a few stories, okay? And then I'm going to get a little nerdy with y'all about this work, okay? But one of the things that often, when people start, asking for constellations, and they start talking about their life and their parents and the things that happened to them, and the way that we do, yeah, we often have this response of too much story. It's too much story. And actually, I'm not really fond of that phrase. I mean, I understand where it comes from. But the fact is that we all need stories. We are a story-making animals, right? And Constellations is very much about revealing stories that have not been heard, stories that have not been told, and which turn out to be kind of running the show in terms of a particular client complaint or symptom or problem. Yeah. And so the story that we've been telling about the problem, as useful as it may have been at some point in time, is not allowing our experience of the problem to shift or change in any way. These are often psychodynamic or internal part stories. I have poor self-esteem because my father criticized me. That kind of thing. Yeah. Not an untrue story. It just doesn't seem to help anymore to keep repeating it. Yeah. And so very frequently what we find in a constellation is that we are about revealing another story that's been hidden or forgotten, and is somehow powering the experience. A little bit like the reminder of the Zulus. That's a story, right? We need to hear about it. It goes invisible, yeah? So let me just share a few. And these are real stories, okay? So I had a client who had a compulsive overeating issue. And you might imagine immediately start making your stories about why do people compulsively overeat, right? We have a bunch of them that can be useful, right? That can be very useful. Protective function, reminds us of the love of something. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stories that we may have, psychological stories about that. But nothing was working. And when I did the interview with her, we looked at the history of her grandparents who had barely survived the siege of Stalingrad, which, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the great famine events of the 20th century. Yeah, they are reduced to eating shoe leather kind of thing. So her grandparents presumably spent many years desperately hungry. Yeah. And so out of love and belonging to these people, she had their hunger. Yeah. Very different from the usual psychological interpretations of why someone might overeat. Yeah. And something we would never get to via those conventional psychological psychological interpretations. Thank you, Maya. So another one. I had a client who was a young Chinese American woman. Depending upon your context, you may have more or fewer sort of descendants of immigrants, kind of part of the people who are around you. And at this point, my apologies, I don't remember what her complaint was, what her difficulty was, what she had come to me for. But I remember at one point she said to me, yeah, and my mother, when she was 18, was sent to be on a farm. And the sound of it was like, that sounds nice. Got to be on a farm when she was 18. Yeah. And I said to her, you mean re-education camp? Knowing something about the Cultural Revolution in the 70s and being able to do the math a little bit. And she said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I said, go talk to your mom. Go talk to your mom. And she came back to me and she said, I had no idea. Because of course her parents were protecting her from all that. Yeah, yeah. They wanted to relieve her of that history. But of course she belonged to it and the extraordinary difficulties that her parents went through during that time. Another thing that happens a lot in my work with people is someone's talking about Uncle Joe or Grandpa, Juan or whoever it is, yeah? Some male ancestor, yeah, he went to war, I don't know much about that. Yeah. And then we end up exploring this ancestor's experience of war, and we discover how impactful it was and how often vets do come back from these experiences and they don't share about it. They don't tell anybody. Yeah. Because one, they had such an intense experience that they don't know how to talk about it. And two, we kind of ask them not to implicitly. Yeah. And so usually by the end of this work, the client turns to me and said, I had no idea how important that was. I had no idea. And at that point, I'm usually inviting them to find a local war memorial of some sort and lay flowers. Yeah. Don't skip Memorial Day or Veterans Day or whatever your local acknowledgements are. This is not about approving of war, right? It's not about that. None of us approve of war. We wish we didn't take our young men and now young women and send them off to war. Yeah. It's just honoring the impact of us sending them off to war had on our ancestors and how it affects us. Having a place of respect for that. And then one more. A client, and this is pretty common, some of you may identify with this, having a mom who's very needy, who kind of parentalizes you a bit or spouseifies you, asks you to take care of them in a sense. And the pain of that, right? And for this client, the rage that even goes with that, right? Very understandable. My mom wouldn't be my mom. I had to be a mom to my own mother. Yeah. And this is very difficult, right? This is a very difficult experience to have, particularly if you're growing into an adult person and your mother's still alive. Yeah. And you're trying to navigate this relationship. And when we did this constellation, what we discovered is that her mother was born right after a tragic lost child, right? So her older sibling. And what we saw in the constellation was that mother's mother could not let herself bond with her daughter because she was too in shock, too fearful that she would lose another child. She couldn't bear it. Yeah. We have a different story of the mother now. And then if we allow the constellation to unfold a bit, mourn the lost child, so that the grandmother can now look at her daughter with love and regret, then the client's mother can start to perk up and start being a mom to her own daughter. Yeah. And this is all stuff we feel in constellations work. Yeah. These new stories, which we can only get so far in trying to help this client to think or feel differently about their mother, right? Or take care of her own inner child and mother herself, or the different things that we do to try and psychologically deal with these larger systemic realities, and where the adjustment is only available at the system level. Yeah? So that we can walk through life just feeling differently. So the big thing that I teach in constellation work is, and I see your question, Ilea, I'll get to that in just one second, is this shift. Yeah. And we're doing this a lot in the spaces of racial justice and other kinds of justice work, right? If you're an African American in the United States and you're wrestling with depression, one way to deal with that is to say, what's up with you and being depressed, right? Or we can say depression is a pretty understandable response to generations of white supremacy and racism, right? Yeah. It's a systemic response, right? And it's a systemic intervention. Yeah. And so the response to the question is that was just posted is a few things. We shift from seeing our mother as some kind of selfish monster, labels of narcissist, the kinds of things we use, understandably, to help to understand our parents. We now see the mother as herself as a person who's carrying wounds. This does shift something for us. Yeah. When we were small, we can only see our parents as, we don't have this larger perspective. We can't expect it of a 4-year-old, but we're adults. Yeah. And when we see our parent differently, something shifts in us. Oh, she didn't abandon me. She didn't know how to do better. Yeah. The extra piece that we often see in constellations is the mother being able to come into her motherhood and to feel congruently like a mother. Yeah. This is why we often go back several generations, yeah, so we can strengthen the line so we can have a different experience of our parents and of our ancestors. Yeah. And it happens somatically. It doesn't, it's not an intellectual move. Yeah. And that's my final response to you, Ilea, is it's not an intellectual move. It's a somatic one. And we feel differently in the present of our mother. Bert Hellinger talks about changing the inner image. The difference between a mother that we carry as a monster and a mother we carry who actually loved us underneath all that. It actually makes a difference. The new story changes things for us. Yeah. And I believe you, Ilea. This is an introduction, and we're not going to do constellations here of an extended sort. And as a facilitator, who here has seen this in constellations, these kinds of movements? Yeah, 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 yeah. So I want to say a few things about the framework and the method. The method is easy. There's a lot of narration out there about constellations are very hard. They aren't. They really aren't. You set things up and things start to happen. One of my teachers, Jan Jakob Stam, said, you can set something up and something will happen. I promise, something will happen. Question whether it will be useful or coherent, right? Yeah. You set things up and people report, my right hand is cold, things like that. The method is easy. The framework, which I'm going to say a few words about, takes longer to understand because, again, we're all trained to think psychodynamically and very personally. Yeah. And this shift to thinking systemically is a pretty different way of looking at the world, particularly when it comes to our own problems or looking at family problems. Yeah. There are other contexts where we think systemically pretty naturally, but it isn't often translated to that space. So that takes a time, and also to get mastery, you need to do it. You just need to do it. You need to do the practice. The other thing I want to name for those of you who facilitate groups or are thinking about facilitating groups, the big thing is performance anxiety, right? You've got a group here right now. What do I do with them? Ah! Right? It's like getting out on a stage and there's no procedure anyone can hand you. You've got to ad-lib the whole way, yeah, if it's going to be honest, right? And so that takes some practice as well, right? Just doing it and being exposed to it. So at this point, what I want to do is offer up some of the key ideas here. And I'm going to put some things into the, is this right? What is all this? Sorry, Zoom keeps changing things. And then I'm like, what? And so I want to offer up some key ideas. And I'm going to put them all in here right now. Okay. So there are other key ideas, but I'm just going to throw these out. For those of you who have been exposed a little bit, you may actually have heard these, but you're not quite sure what they are. You know what they are a little bit. Yeah. And so, and I'm going to hold off on answering questions in the chat for just a little bit. Okay. I want to move forward a little bit on some of the things I want to share here. So the first one is orders of love. What one of my friends calls principles of group self-organization, which is a clunkier way to say it, but it's this idea that groups do tend to have structure, right? Any kind of group, it acquires structure, and families are no different, and they have some pretty special ones. The first one is belonging. Whoever was born into the family belongs. You can't be thrown out. You can't die out. You can't be adopted out. Obviously, in life, these exclusions happen all the time, right? Some of you may experience yourself as excluded from your family in various kinds of ways. But this is a violation of the basic order of things, and something always seeks to compensate and bring back in. So one of the things in Constellations is we want to honor this order of belonging and find a way to help things that do belong together to belong together correctly and properly again. Yeah, this is why we remember Uncle Joe who went off to war and never came back. Yeah, the eldest child who was adopted out because mom wasn't ready to deal with being a mother. All these people who get lost. Yeah. The next order of love is seniority. I call it seniority in role. In families, generally, life flows in one direction from the ancestors to us, not the other way, like we did not birth our grandparents, right? We can't go back a generation and a half and heal what happened in some terrible historical event back there. Yeah. Life and love flows in one direction to us. And so we talk about sort of seniority, authority, and role. Yeah. And so generally speaking, we talk about the parents or the grandparents being bigger than, not the best word always, but more senior to the children and the grandchildren. This gets violated all the time. In my example before, mothering your own mother, right? These kinds of upside downednesses happen all the time. We take on roles that are not ours, or other people in the family do that as well. If you had a sibling who bullied you, and that was one of the great imprints of your childhood, or you bullied a sibling, chances are the two of you were playing out some conflict that was not honored and given a place some earlier time in the family system. Yeah. We're often unconsciously taking on symptoms and roles that don't belong to us. And this is a gesture of love. I want to offer this up to you. This is from, for those of you who want to know what a good basic book is, I very much recommend Bert Hellinger's Love's Hidden Symmetry to you. Where was that? It's a profoundly moving thing to observe clients approach the orders of love and spontaneously melt into soft and intimate love, even after a lifetime of hate and anger and abuse. And again, this is not an action of the will. And that melting, that releasing, it's something we can let go into when we're glad is happening, and can surprise us that we're glad that it's happening. And if everything in the constellations, is to get back to the earlier question, seems to be set up really well, and that melting is not happening yet, my rule of thumb is something has not been included yet. Something hasn't been included or seen or honored or given a place yet. Yeah? That needs to be honored and seen and given a place. To gain insight into the orders of love is wisdom. To follow them with love is humility. Striving with willpower alone can't create the systemic equilibrium in a relationship that allows love to thrive. Yeah? So we try to think and talk our way through these things. And thinking and talking is good. Insight is good. These are all good things. And they have their limits, okay? And then this takes us to our next notion, which is entanglement, along with belonging and conscience or loyalty, which is that when we belong well to something, yeah, we have a sense of loyalty to it. The old saying is, the child of thieves who steals does not feel guilty, right? If you need to see this dynamic at work, watch the original Godfather. Michael trying to get away from the mafia, the moment his father's life is put at threat, he's back in, right? Yeah. I love this quotation. Children are boundless in love, but limited life experience. So it's a great temptation for them to unite with their parents in suffering. Yeah. If a mother is depressed, her children feel tempted to be depressed as well. But maturing love demands that children gradually give up the blind love of childhood and learn to love as adults. Again, easier said than done. That's why we do a constellation rather than talking it all out, right? Yeah, because we feel the injury, we feel the hurt, right? Yeah. What about that needs to be included and honored and given a place? Yeah, so that we can move forward with the full support of our ancestors. Yeah. So entanglement is the tendency of all of us, unconsciously most of the time, to take on the symptoms and sufferings of our ancestors as a way to belong. Yeah. We think of people who are the descendants of great genocidal events. Yeah, the Holocaust or slavery or other such events across the planet. Yeah. How dare I feel chipper and well when my ancestors had it so hard? Yeah. And then the question is are we just caught in it? Yeah. And the answer is that first movement we invited to honor what happened to them. Yeah. To see it with the eyes of our heart. Dear ancestors, I see, I honor it, I give it a place, I leave it with you. Thank you for my life. Please support me as I move forward. Yeah. A couple more concepts that I put into the chat. The knowing field. It's this thing that we talk about and don't know how to talk about. Some sense of an intelligence, the way I think of it, is everything. Me, you, my artwork, my ideas in my head, your memories, your ancestors, you're thinking about the grocery list you got to shop for later, this mug, everything in reality is embedded in a field of information that's always there. Most of it is not visible, right? The great mass of it is not visible. We would get overwhelmed if it were, right? We couldn't function. Yeah. And when we set up a constellation with a question and intention and focus, we bring in mom and dad and France, which was mentioned earlier. Yeah. We feel the emotional and meaning truth of that system. Yeah. If it's a sad system, we feel the sadness. If it's a terrified system, we feel the terror. If we feel the guilt in the system, we feel the guilt. Yeah. And that's the knowing field. We start setting up aspects of a system, and the emotional truth of that system starts to show up. Yeah. You can do this in your mind. You did it before, right? You did a constellation in your mind. And you felt the emotional truth of that system. And even some of you reported some kind of spontaneous things that started happening, right? That had some trajectory and usefulness for you. Yeah. That's the knowing field. And representational perception is simply the perception of that. Yeah. I do want to name that everybody does representational perception all the time. If you're ever driving down the road and you go, that guy's going to cut in front of me, and you don't even know why you know it. We are navigating life with this kind of sixth sense all the time because we feel the emotional, we actually have the ability, the limbic brain is the ability to perceive the emotions of systems, right? You walk into a crowd and you can feel that it feels safe and happy, or it feels scared and terrified or angry. We are actually set up just as much as herd animals. It's the emotional intelligence of the herd to feel it. You know? So we're using it all the time. We mostly don't notice it, right? We mostly don't notice it. In constellations, we turn up the gain on this, make it real loud, so we can feel the grief. We can feel the terror. We can feel the guilt. We can feel the rage. Yeah? So we can finally start doing what? Dealing with the elephant in the room. Yeah? And I use that as a metaphor, but it's really not. If you've ever been in a situation where finally the family started talking about the thing that they haven't been talking about, yeah? And the relief that comes from doing that, oh, we're finally talking about dad's drinking, or whatever it is. Yeah, yeah, finally. Yeah. This is what a constellation is like, kind of on steroids, right? But it's stuff that's been forgotten about usually. Yeah. Yeah. And the whole system goes, phew, we finally acknowledged and included and have given a place to that. Yeah. And now there's some relief. And as a facilitator, this is a great deal of the art of facilitating is being on the lookout for the excluded event, person, meaning, feeling that if we include it, will give relief. One way I like to talk about constellations is it is the long overdue funeral. It's not always a funeral, right? But some ritual action, community ritual action to acknowledge something that should have been acknowledged a long time ago, but for whatever reason could not be. They were running from the enemy, or, you know, they were too busy just getting by, or, you know, whatever it is, they couldn't. And we still carry it today, rats. And how can we release it? How can we honor it so that it releases? Yeah. It's like the Vietnam War Memorial. Sorry for those of you who are international, but I use this as an example all the time. I'm sure you have your local versions of these kinds of memorials that are more than your average memorials. They're kind of a place of community grieving and acknowledgement. And they do something really kind of remarkable. Yeah. And in that context, it was a war we couldn't talk about, right? We couldn't acknowledge. Yeah. And it finally gave a place for us to at least start to. Yeah. So you step into that and you feel it. You feel the rage, you feel the guilt, you feel the confusion, the whatever it is. Yeah. And people do represent in lots of different styles. God bless them. For those of you who have seen constellations, you'll see lots of different representational styles. And your job as a facilitator is to figure out how to work with that. Now, a few things I want to say about my approach to teaching. And again, many of you here are not considering my training, and that's just fine. But I think this will be useful for you regardless, wherever you are in your curiosity about constellations. First, learning the foundational principles, some of which I just shared, really making the muscle memory, right? So you think of great artists who start out by learning the basics and then they diverge. They use all of that skill of learning the basics to break the rules, right? To go out there and create something unique. So we do spend time learning the foundational principles. From the very beginning, we practice. And that may be uncomfortable for some people, but in a lot of trainings say you need to watch a gabillion constellations before you can even try facilitating. I understand where that comes from, but I think it doesn't serve learning, because I think people get scared. And I can't facilitate until, and then fill in the blank, right? I don't want people to be scared. Have a certain reverence, you know, certain kind of fear and trembling is useful, yeah. But I don't want them to be terrified, and you know, to go over little jumps first, you know, to build themselves up. So that as you're learning the foundational principles, you're also practicing. It's all happening at the same time rather than sequentially. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the cohort learning model. This is different for a lot of online stuff. Most trainings are online these days because it's just more convenient for everybody, right? Mostly for online stuff, there's a lot of modular learning. So you do this 2-hour class and this half-day chunk, and you cobble it together to get to your certification. It's a perfectly fine way to learn. It's not the way I teach. The reason why is that you lose the experience of a peer learning community. And it is my experience that when people have to learn this in community with some people you like and some people you don't like, and you know, all this stuff with different backgrounds, the learning is much more intense and a lot less theoretical. Yeah, it's more embodied. So that's why I teach in the form of long weekends, even though we're online, because it's a pure learning model. And then finally, it is an adult learning course. I cannot underline this enough. It is for people who, our stuff is going to get kicked up, right? It's getting kicked up even now, right? It's part of the learning to be able to take care of yourself, to be able to observe yourself a bit, and to be able to engage in the experience of the group, understanding that we're all here to learn constellations. And that some people who are in a place in their healing journey where that's really hard to do as soon as stuff starts to get kicked up, right? So this is an adult learning course. I want to say a word about constellations as a job. If any of you is thinking about, I want to be a facilitator someday and have that pay the bills, right? Or part of paying the bills in some way. If you're a coach or a therapist, or you do some alternative healing work, which a lot of people who, are astrologers or yoga teachers or people who come from these backgrounds are often interested in learning constellations. One also usually does need also have to learn about how to build a business. Being self-employed is no joke. It takes some work. And that's something that I do help people with. I've learned some things about how to, alternative healing people, we're special. We have some things that are a little different about us. And our relationship to business is a little different than the way some other people's relationship to business is. It's completely congruent. It's not a problem, but a lot of our frames around business do not work for us very well. Yeah. So I actually really enjoy helping people blow up all the old ways of thinking about business and finding ways to do heart-centered business, ethical business, engage with the sacred marketplace in ways that feel really good to them and really do help them pay the bills, right? Now, I make my entire living from doing constellations work. Having said that, constellations are vulnerable emotional work as a facilitator, right? We really need to understand that. Those of you who are psychotherapists out there, and I think there are a few of you, already know this. Like, it gets ouchy, my friends. It gets quite ouchy. And so that's something you do need to take into account, right? This is where I usually say something stupid like, you could become an accountant. And then I think, oh, working with money is every bit as vulnerable and people get upset about their finances. So I don't know if there's any really non-vulnerable emotional work that's out there that's real, but it is no joke. You need to be able to have the structures and the perspectives that will help you keep your feet on the ground, as you're often dealing with some really difficult material and clients who can be pretty wounded. Yeah. So I want to, and that's something we talk about in the training. It's emotional labor, as they say. However, the reason why I do it is because, as I said before, it can be the systemic perspective that people have really been needing. They've been absolutely blocked. They can only go so far. And they don't realize that this 2 generations back ancestral history is something that needs to be dealt with for them to be able to keep moving forward. And that's why I love this work. That's why I love it. And then I do want to say one other thing about just professional and ethical practice. Again, we're dealing with people, A, who are paying us, and B, who are vulnerable. And so having a good structure of professional and ethical practice, I could say a whole lot more about that, is really important. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to say about constellations. That's a 5-month training boiled down to all the material. I want to invite some general questions, perhaps from some new folk, about some of the concepts and material that I've just shared. And then we're going to do some exercises. Okay, we're going to do some actual work together. Yeah, Carmen, I see your hand.
Hi, I thank you. That was really good explanation and introduction. I really appreciated that. What came up for me through that is the different, so one issue um, and 10 facilitators, and the results are different with each facilitator. And my question is the core result the same, even though there were different approaches or different outcomes in the constellation?
Maybe, maybe not.
There's no way of really knowing.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the land of nonlinear healing modalities here, right?
Mm.
Yeah, if you go to two different acupuncturists, two different therapists, and you go to therapist A and say I've got depression, and you got therapist B and you say I've got depression, they're going to take you in two different directions. So there is something here about the match between facilitator and client. Yeah. I generally offer half-hour free consultations, one-time new clients only, for people. And I have the online group Constellation Gatherings, another way for people to get to know me and find out, I'm dealing with depression or want a relationship or whatever it is they got going. Does Leslie feel like the right fit for me? Right. So there's a match there. I want to be very careful about this because I don't want this to relieve us of accountability, which is where this can go. But we also want to trust a little bit that the field is sending us the facilitator that might be right for us. Because facilitator and client are also in a system together. Temporarily, right? Just for the time of the interaction. But we want to hope that somehow the field is involved in sending you someone who might be good for you. I'm very careful about that kind of thing because it can be whatever happens. It was supposed to happen and the field wanted it to happen. And then that all of my responsibility around being professional and ethical kind of drops out. So I want to be very careful about this sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, and there are train wrecks. There are facilitators who screw up, or it's just a bad match. Who of us has had a therapist we've regretted seeing for a while, right? It's part of risking being out in the world and having relationships at all. It's fundamentally no different from the risk we take when we decide to go out on a date with someone, right? And deciding to engage with human beings about anything, much less our own personal healing and growth, is risky business. And again, that's why we need to take responsibility for our professionalism and ethics. But no, two different constellators, two different constellations, inevitably. And there's something kind of nice about this because when you're doing a training, yeah, you watch person A facilitate for person B, and you're an observer of this, and you're sitting there going, I would have done this very differently. But what happened was pretty good, right? But I never would have done that. I never would have taken it there. I love this with my students. I watch them doing something and I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. And then 45 minutes later, I'm like amazed at what they accomplished with somebody. And I'm like, I never would have gone there. Yeah. Now, this does not mean we just do whatever. This is why we want to learn the foundations, the principles, the practices. Yeah. Yeah. So it's got some coherence. Yeah. Yeah. We can basically, as they say in math, show our work, why we made those choices. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that answer. That really helped.
Yeah. I mean, We have to learn to deal with a lot of messiness. And then we stay grounded in the choices and that we make. Yeah. Yeah, Ilea.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, I don't have on the headphones. If it gets a problem, I'll put them on. But my question is really simple. I hear you telling me like it's a somatic experience, but I guess like was that but I'm guess my brain is wanting to understand. I only experienced this once and I didn't really walk away with anything. I just walked away with like, okay, people played my family members. And so the book that you read gave a lot of different perspectives. And I think you said something like if the stickiness is still there, then something hasn't been honored.
Yeah.
I, I don't know. I don't know if that was the right phrasing, but I guess it's still the same question I asked in the chat. I'm just trying to understand how it helps the trauma today. Like, okay, I know my mom's mom was
Right.
or in the example you gave, but how does that help me? Like, I still feel abandoned,
Right.
and how do I move forward or the client, you know? So that's
Yeah. Yeah. And I thank you for the question because this is at the heart of facilitating. It really is at the heart of facilitating because this happens to facilitators all the time, right? You do some things, right? And they're good things, and good things are happening in the constellation. Yeah. And yet something isn't moving yet. This is information. This is information a facilitator really needs to take seriously. And what I teach in my training is um, you try something and then you get the feedback. And then you try something and you get the feedback. And you're not trying things arbitrarily. They're based on some, principles and some information. Yeah. And so my question would be, not having been there, something is not moving for the client, for you, despite this good stuff that is happening. What have we not included and honored yet? Right? What is it that we have not included or honored yet? I don't have the answer to that question because I wasn't there. Pretty frequently in these circumstances, we need to honor and include the actual experience of the client. We can't skip over that either, right? Yeah. So something along the lines of, dear mother, I was abandoned by you as a child. Dear daughter, because I myself was abandoned, I also abandoned you, and I regret that. Yeah. Now, I'm not claiming that is the magic wand. Okay, I wasn't in the constellation, and we're not doing it now. But I do want to say to all the facilitators in the room, there is an order of inclusion. And very frequently, the first thing that needs to be included is the client's direct experience of being violated in some way. Or at least also it has to be, along with other. Yeah. Yeah. Because we don't want to implicitly say to the client, what I kind of hear a little bit here is something like, because these things happened to your parents, it shouldn't matter to you what happened to you as a child. That's not the message we want to deliver. Right? So, I don't have the answer to your question. All I can say is if I were your facilitator, I would keep on being on the lookout. I'm curious about what we haven't included that's important here. Now, this is something else I want to say to facilitators. Sometimes we run out of time, right? The group gets tired. The workshop space is going to close soon. We've hit the limit of what we can do, and we honor what's, and in somatic experiencing and trauma work these days, they talk about titrating, small bits, small bits, small bits. We don't try and do everything at once. Sometimes we hit the limits of what a group or a context can accomplish, and we honor that. And we even grieve it a little bit if it feels like it was not enough. Yeah. Yeah. So if you found yourself interested by the experience, if despite that somewhat disappointed, I invite you to keep, go to a few more, see what it's like. Go as a representative. Just see. And it is okay with me. Constellations is not everybody's cup of tea. That's okay, right? Some of you might like acupuncture. Some of you are like, no, needles, right? Some of you might like body work. Some of you are like, my body doesn't feel good, right? It's okay to decide that this work is, find healing in another angle. And if one is only experienced at once, there are a lot of low bar, inexpensive ways to just participate in constellations these days. One does get, as some of you probably can attest, can get a lot of healing by just watching someone else's. Yeah. And it's often useful because it's coming through the side door rather than straight at you. So the defenses aren't quite as up. Yeah. Because there are some human universals. And when we are in the presence of a family coming in better into order and free flow of love, it's good for everybody. It's like being invited to Thanksgiving dinner. Again, my apologies to the international attendees who don't have Thanksgiving, choose whatever holiday you prefer, with a family you don't know who get along with each other. And you go home and you feel good because it was good to be around them. This is what it can be like attending a constellation when you're not having your own constellation done. I hope that goes some way to answering the question, but also for all of you who are considering facilitation or are facilitators, it really is about trying. Bertold Olsemer would just said, when I don't know what to do, I'm quiet until something comes to me. And this guy's a pro. I mean, he's been doing it for like 30 years. Yeah. I wait until something comes to me. You try it, and then you get feedback, and then you adjust. And then you try something, get feedback, and you adjust. Yeah. And you're looking for those releases. You're looking for those relaxations. You're looking for the system going, I'm glad that happened. Yeah. Both in the person of the client and in the group as a whole. Yeah. Okay, so I want to make sure everyone here gets a chance to have a little bit of experience. I am going to, at this stage, because I'm going to remove my spotlight for a moment, and I'm going to go to gallery view, just so I can see you all for a moment. In the publicity for this, I did say a few words about giving you kind of facilitator experiences. I can only do so much of that. I can't, I'm not teaching facilitation enough for you to go and facilitate for someone else here. That wouldn't be quite fair to either of you. However, when we do things called small group work, mini constellations, we are working some facilitator muscles. And so I want to invite you to consider, you're not required, everyone here, it's consensual. You don't have to be in a group if you don't want to, but if you're going to be in a group, you do need to be seen. Okay, so if you're going to be in a pair, it's only fair to the other person for them to be able to see you. Okay, and I'm going to invite you to do a few exercises. Okay, the first one is going to be something that some of you have experienced before because you've been to my groups. Sarah, would you demo this with me for just a moment? Sarah Priest, in case there are two Sarahs. I cannot hear you, Sarah. I don't know why. Yeah, no, whatever's going on, she can't be heard. Mandy, would you be willing to? Mandy, are you the Mandy from that I know? You're so far away from the screen.
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Sorry about that. So I'm gonna spotlight us both. And we're going to do this really super quickly. Okay, there we go. So the first one is going to be you and your heart. Okay. So if you decide you want to do this, Zoom is going to put you in a room with somebody, and just make this real simple for yourself. Okay, no drama, just super simple. Um, say hello to each other. Hi, I'm Leslie. Right? And I would just decide real quickly who's going to go first, and we're going to decide. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to explore the system of me and my heart. Right? Really, this isn't even an ancestral system. Okay. So a little bit of ritual. I will say to Mandy, Mandy, would you represent my heart?
Yes.
Yeah. And then we're just quiet until we have something we want to share. It's just about noticing your experience. Okay. And one thing, this is the bit that the little facilitatory part. Okay. Try to put aside your stories about yourself and your heart. As a facilitator, you want to just observe what this goes right to what I was just saying. Observe what's happening right now, right? Including your own experience as a facilitator, right? You're not really facilitating this, right? I'm being myself, right? But notice my experience and what the representative for my heart says to me, yeah? And as we said before, you might be surprised. So what are you noticing, heart? My heart. I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. By and large, we represent with our eyes open unless the role wants us to close our eyes. And we're going to be a little quick about this. So what do you notice?
Okay. I guess what I'm sensing is a speed, and I'm trying to figure out. I guess I kind of want things to slow down.
Hmm.
The image of like a cart and something going a little fast is coming to me, where I want to rein in a little bit.
And what is it like when you look at me?
I feel comforted.
So I think what's coming through is something like, and again, this is all about honoring what is as it is, right? That's to the group. Um, I really embrace your desire to slow down, and I may need to stay a little speeded up. But I think it's okay if we have slightly different speeds. And I don't know if that's okay with you. You can go slower than me. You can go
Yeah,
slower.
um, yeah, I guess I felt tempted to bring it up because I don't want to um, say it was bad. It's just uh, um,
How does it feel to hear it's okay for you to slow down?
yeah, I think that's what I needed to hear. That feels like a okay. That gives me permission. I felt like I needed maybe some permission to slow down.
And after that landed in you, I took a big breath. So I have my insight. I want to thank you very much. I'm going to release you from the role. Okay. Thank you very much, Mandy. I'm going to remove the spotlights. There we go. So it's really, you don't need to think about what's going on with me in my heart, or, what's the story of me in my heart, just to really drop into what's actually going on in the moment, right? And it could be really yummy and comfy and lovey-dovey, or it could be, it's your heart. There could be grief. There can be confusion. As you saw, there was a little bit of, we had to communicate a little bit, right? So anything could come up because it's you and your heart. Yeah. So we're going to do that for 10 minutes, 5 minutes each. It's plenty of time. Okay. And again, the facilitator piece here is just to keep coming back to what's happening right now. Put aside the story a bit. What's happening right now? What's showing up right now? So please let me know right now if you would prefer not to participate in this exercise with somebody else. Let me know one way or another so Hannah would prefer, I'm gonna have to write names down. So give me a second. Hannah would prefer not to. And Yahazkal. See, some people are doing that on. And again, just a reminder, if you're saying you would like to do this, you need to be able to turn on your video, okay? Because we still have a couple of people who don't have their video on yet. Anybody else who prefer not to? I have Hannah and Rebecca and Yehezkel and Elizabeth, okay? And Christy. iPhone 8, you want to do this? If I don't hear from you, I might leave you out of a pair because I don't know if you are near your computer. And Maya, you just unmuted yourself. I'm sorry, do you want to do this?
I want to participate. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Okay. Give me a minute to put everybody in. Oh, and those of you who said I'd prefer not to do this, you will get an invitation, just ignore it. Okay. It'll just take me a moment to remove people. Think I did this right. We will see. Okay, and again, just really simple, no drama. What's the experience right now? Yeah. Okay. If you have any problems, you can call me in. Again, those of you who said they didn't want to do this, just don't accept the invitation. And those of you who are not doing this, that means you've got a 10-minute break. Hannah, you have an invitation, so hopefully you got that.
I did, but I denied it. Is that right?
No, you. Oh, that's right. You didn't want to do this. Never mind. Sorry.
It's okay. I just want to observe right now. I'm brand new to it, so.
Oh, brand new is not relevant, but that's okay. do that. Oh, and now Seema is there. Hey, Elizabeth. People will start popping back in. Okay, here they all come back. So thank you, everyone, for giving that a try. And so let's have one or two shares, very brief. But what did you notice in that? I always want to have one or two shares just to sort of complete these small exercises.
That went too fast.
There you go. There you go. It was. I always have a little warning, like make sure you stop at the 5-minute point so both of you get your turn. Yeah. Something that.
Sorry, I think that I noticed that my heart seems like a very young, like the way it seems like it's very young. It's a small child or young part.
Is that Judith speaking?
That is Judith, sorry.
Yeah. So again, once we start to get to a young part, we're now a little bit into interpretation. Yeah. So just it sneaks in, doesn't it? So just notice today in this moment, your heart's feeling young.
Yeah, it was feeling young.
And that's something that for whatever reason needs to be seen and acknowledged and honored right now.
Not youthful, just like a small child.
Yeah. Tomorrow you do this, it'll show up as an old woman. I don't know what it'll show up as tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just stay present to the meaning and let it speak to us. Oh, my heart's feeling young today. Maybe it needs some care, or whatever came through in that. Yeah, thank you, Judith. One more. This is the careful thing about facilitating. Just, right now, that's how it is. Yeah. One more share before we do another exercise. Ashley, yeah.
I'll share. It's more of a technical thing. So, as an NLP practitioner, the lack of procedure with Constellation so far that I'm experiencing feels so exciting and safe somehow. I don't know. I'm really enjoying it. So, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed my partner there very much.
There is a little procedure.
Sure.
We start talking about longer constellations, how to do the interview and how to choose representatives and all that sort of stuff, right? But yes, compared to NLP,
yeah,
which
Yeah.
is extremely procedural. For those of you who don't know neurolinguistic programming, you don't need to know what that is. But it is on the a different end of the spectrum. Yeah. Although even what I found that people who've learned NLP tend to be very good at staying present to what's showing up right now.
Mhm.
For those of you who have done belief elicitation work in NLP, it's actually really close to what we do in constellations sometimes. What are the meanings that are present right now in the system? So it will be useful background if you decide to go for this. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna do one more. We're gonna squeeze in one more exercise. And this is gonna be quite different because I want to invite you to pair with you and your ancestors. Okay. And if you want to choose a particular ancestor, you may. Or you can just label them. Would you please represent my ancestors? And of course, you can't, like, it would be quite schizophrenic if they all showed up, right? So some particular meaning will show through, right? It could be they want to support you, or it could be grief, or it could be whatever. It's whatever is going to show up right now in the meaning of your ancestors. Yeah. And so I'm going to invite you to do that again for 10 minutes. Do stop in the middle so everybody gets their time. I give you 11 for padding. Is there anyone who did it before who doesn't want to do it now, or didn't do it before and does want to do it now? Okay, Romana's letting me know that she's starting to her computer's about to die. So yeah. And anybody else? Elizabeth, did you have your hand up that you want to you would like to give it a try? Okay. Sorry, I just got to take notes because I won't hold this all in my brain. Anybody else need to change their whatever? Sarah, do you want to be in a group? Yes, you do. Okay. Everyone else, they're saying if you did it, you want to do it. If you didn't do it, you don't want to do it. Okay, good. Give me a second, just a little adjustment. I think that may work for that one group of 3 that we had. So we'll see. Okay, and then Sarah. Right. Where is Sarah? Where are you, Sarah? Okay, I've got to. There's this weird thing. An unassigned person kind of disappears. Where did you go, Sarah? Okay, I'm going to get you guys started, and I'm going to figure out Sarah, who's going to join Ashley in just a moment. Okay, I have to figure out what's going on here. Open all rooms. There you are. And Leah, you joining a group? Go ahead and click on that. Here they come. Okay, as usual, I am running a little bit later than I usually do. Than I planned, that is. But that's how it goes. What I want to do before we do any last shares or questions, I want to make sure that I give you the information for the training. There it all is. There's the link. There is some incentives to register. All that information is right there. The other thing I want to share with you is something I mentioned about before, which is that every 2 to 3 weeks I do constellations online. Some of you have attended them. It's just $10 to come and witness and represent. Okay, so there's some information for you. If you're interested in the training, I really recommend A, you look at the website, and B, you reach out to me ASAP if you have not already, because it's coming pretty soon. And it's a commitment. Yeah, it's a big commitment. So that is the information for you to take a look at and reach out to me if you have more questions or you're interested. Ashley, quick question. Do you assign roles when you teach how to facilitate, or you let the field decide? Hope that makes sense. By and large, my approach is that I invite the client to ask people to represent their mother, their father, their whatever. Yeah. Not always. Sometimes we do it in different ways. The reason why I do that is there's something quite sweet to the ritual of turning to Ashley and saying, Ashley, would you represent my mom? Something about that that's kind of tender and dear. And so that's usually the way I do that. But there are other ways to do it as well. And we can talk about that in the training or other contexts.
Thank you.
So we've got a couple minutes left here. And I just want to invite people, if you have a brief share from what you just did, or if you have remaining questions about all this quickly, so that we can get, a couple in. Go ahead and raise your digital paw or whatever it is that to get my attention. What did you notice about your ancestors today? I think Sarah's doing her real paw.
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I had to switch to my phone. It was so hard to get back into this meeting, but it was so meaningful. It was the most beautiful experience I've had in such a really long time.
Wow.
With Ashley and my mom, and it was so moving. And I just thank you to everyone. It was just meant the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And that's it doesn't always happen this way, right? But when we're in the presence of something true, our body knows it and we respond. Yeah. Yeah. And you just heard that in her voice, that she was in the presence of something true that mattered. And that's what we're looking for as facilitators, we're hoping for. And we may need to get through some weeds before we get there, or sometimes it happens really fast. You never quite know. Ilea, last one before we bring this to a close.
Just a quick wondering. So it seems like we can do this with anyone. And is there any concern or worry about the ego speaking if I were to do this with my friend?
God bless the ego. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I mean, if you ask someone to represent your mom and they start doing what they think your mom would do, this is not helpful, right? Or what France would do, or whatever it is. Yeah. What clearly came through and what we just heard was something true came through from the field. It arose, and we can feel the difference. It's not actually hard to tell the difference, of someone acting something out or someone bringing through something true, even if we don't like it or it doesn't feel good or whatever. Or like, oh man, that seems true. That's one of the tricky things as facilitators. So sometimes you do need to coach representatives a little bit when they're new to the work. Even experienced ones, sometimes you need to sometimes do a little coaching. Yeah. So yes, you can do this with your friend. Absolutely. And you need to do a little bit of that's why I do the demo first, so that I can really model a little bit of what it means to be present to what's arising rather than imposing, oh, I'm going to act this way because this is what a heart would act like. Right? So yes, anyone can do it. And there's a certain culture or framework we are looking for around that. And it can be a little tricky, and that's part of the trickiness of being a facilitator, is helping people with that a little bit. So good question. Yeah. And anyone can do it, and you don't want to ask your friend to represent your mom and then have her act out your mom. That just wouldn't feel good, right? Okay, good. So take a moment, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I invite you. You've been here 2 hours. Just notice we went through a bunch of information. You had some experiences. Tune to your heart for a sec and allow one image or aha or resonance or question to come to you. This is your particular gift. What is your particular gift or your treasure? And then turn it into a sentence. And we will finish with popcorn style. Just lean forward, unmute, share your one sentence. What is your gift or your takeaway?
I got my mom back when I needed her most.
Trusting the field.
Love
I
the
can
heart.
live in the moment.
Sorry.
Yehezkel, you go ahead. We didn't hear you. And then I don't know who the other person was. You can go.
I have the right to live in the moment and be at peace.
I was the next one. The heart just wants love, to be loved.
Validating my healing journey.
Opening to spaciousness.
Allow to lead with your heart.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I like to end with a messy goodbye. Just go ahead and unmute and say goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.